Thank you, everybody, to be here. This is part of my research. The research is called Migrant Natives, Poetry in the Crossroad. So it's more about literature, but literature as a way of resistance. And so Rayen Kvyeh was born in Huequén, Mayeco province, Gulumapu, Chile. Gulumapu is the Mapudungun name of Chile. She is a playwright and poet who has dedicated her life to defending human rights and cultural freedom among the Mapuche nation. She was a prisoner of the Pinochet military dictatorship and a refugee in Germany and Nicaragua between 1982 and 1986. In 1987, she returned to Chile, and in 1990, she founded the Art, Science, and Knowledge Mapuche House, Mapu Ñuque, which means Mother Earth, where she was supported research on Mapudungun and has published local Mapuche writers in the eponymous journal. In 1991, her book Luna de los Primeros Brotes, Moon of the First Sprouts, was released in Germany as a bilingual edition in Mapudungun and German. In 2000, traveling back to Germany, her poetry witnessed the protests against Yugoslavia's war, the old Yugoslavia. In 2007, she received the Nocid International Poetry Prize in Italy. Among the early 1990s Mapuche Huilliche poets, Huilliche is like the Mapuche people from the south. So like each direction has its own name. So for example, the people from the coast is the Lafkenche, and the people from the Cordillera, they are the Pewenche. The Pewen is the tree, the sacred tree. So Huilliche are from the south. Poets, among the early 1990s Mapuche Huilliche poets that grew up in the south speaking Mapudungun, Rayen Kvyeh has a special place as an activist and cultural manager. Her poetry has a particular shade because of her exile during Pinochet's dictatorship. Hence, her political verses have denounced injustice not only in the Gulumapu, but also in Kosovo and Nicaragua. Through Kvyeh's written testimony, this paper is an approach to her understanding of territory, memory, and eroticism. As I will discuss, this paper challenges some of the contemporary literature that idolizes the nomad as a metaphor for detachment from places, homelands, and territories. Since the 1990s, many scholars on cultural difference and ethics of positionality, such as Claudio Guillén from the comparative literature, or Gupta and Ferguson from the social theory, or Stuart Hall from the cultural studies, or Edouard Said and Walter Mignolo from postcolonial studies, have directed their research toward a classic tension between unity and difference, and universal and diverse. Hall, for example, suggests that there are two ways to think about cultural identity. He says, first, as a shared historical oneness, and second, as a uniqueness of ruptures and discontinuities. He says cultural identity, in this second sense, in the uniqueness, is a matter of becoming as well as of being. It belongs to the future as much as to the past. It is not something that which already exists, transcending place, time, history, and culture. Hall, Gupta, and Ferguson also denaturalize the relationship between place and cultural identity. They draw attention to two common assumptions about culture: that culture and territory are naturally connected. They call that ethnological naturalism, and that there is an essential or natural convergence between the nation, culture, and nation states. That's the national naturalism. Gupta and Ferguson argue that the colonial conception of space as a discontinuous map of tribes, nations, first war, third war, west, east, has posited a deterministic perspective that camouflages the fact that distinctiveness is a construction of history. The authors explain it as follows. Spaces have always been hierarchically interconnected instead of naturally disconnected. Then cultural and social change becomes not a matter of cultural contact and articulation, but one of rethinking difference through connection. Nevertheless, Rayen Kvyeh's experience inside and outside of her own territory contradicts the understandings of these authors. Indeed, the project to link territory with identity and culture is one of the foundational arguments of Mapuche social and cultural movements in their struggle against Wincas, which is the word for non-Chileans. As Gupta and Ferguson stated, the same discourses based on ethnicity, land, and claims and nationalism can be used by both colonial and post-colonial mobilizations. In Renate Egenbrod's Traveling Knowledges of 2005, we can find a suggestive epigraph by Abenaki poet Cheryl Sabego, which clarifies this debate. He says, I never even encountered the word essentialist before coming to grad school. And then it was thrown at me like a dirty word, mostly because I wrote something about native writers and the land in a paper. The same professor who labeled me essentialist said that there was no truth, not history, just lots of people viewpoints. I argued that some things actually did happen, that some versions of history are not just a point of view, but actually distortions and lies. Savago pronounces with this anecdote the banned word essentialist among the contemporary analysis by the social theory, the cultural studies, and the literary criticism. Savago reminds us that essentialists, ethnological national naturalism, and cultural difference are all fixed concepts that cannot cover the whole range and diversity of the human experience. Even essentialization itself is diverse, and there are at least two types. If essentialism in indigenous discourses, understood in Smith's sense as a strategically claiming a self-defined positionality, including concepts of spirituality, is empowering for Aboriginal people, essentializing definitions from outsiders affect the opposite. Beyond the widespread understanding about cultural identity as a postmodern, never-ending reconstruction with multiple affiliations, like Stuart Hall, there are still people such as Rayen Kvyeh and Cheryl Sabego who live their cultural identity and their understanding of time through their connections with place. These writers challenge some of the contemporary literature that romanticize nomad, migrant, diaspora as metaphors for detachment from places, homelands, and territories. The following is the poem Grandma Moon from Moon of Ashes by Rayen Kvyeh. Well, this is my translation. I hope that it works. My cell is 4 square meters with coffee-colored walls. The switch of the light is outside. With the sunset, every evening, the woman jailer turns the lights off. At the top of the back wall, there is a small window with black iron bars. My bed is a thin mattress, and its blanket the old poncho that my father gave me as a present. My books are scattered in blissful chaos. Each night, I build a hill with them until I reach the window. Night after night, my grandma Moon arrives. We converse and share the cell darkness and the anguish about having young children alone in the village's old house. In silence, she listens to me. My children sleep. I A mysterious beam lights the humble house. Smiling, my grandma moon kisses them. In the morning, my books are scattered in blissful chaos. The henchmen have not been able to switch the moonlight light off. As we can read in Grandma Moon, there is a profound relationship between nature and resistance in Kvyeh's poetry. In her work, nature has multiple approaches. Sometimes she is the site of destruction by transnationals or is being privatized by the national government. Sometimes she is the protector. Kvyeh means moon. In Mapudungun, the language of the earth, of the soil. And it is a word that is present in the title of all the three of her books of poetry. In her own name, the author carries her ancestors, the name of the grandma, as she calls the moon. Kvyeh plays with the connection between nature, memory, and the body. She draws a poetic image in which women are giving birth to rebels, a metaphor for the womb where the seeds of the revolution are growing. In Kvyeh's poetry, trees, creeks, and hills are not just places or parts of a landscape. Rather, they are considered grandfathers and grandmothers who have witnessed the multiple invasions into indigenous traditional territories. Engraved in nature, there is a history of encounters and injustices. Elders such as Lonco Cayupan, Lonco means chief, paradigmatical warriors such as Lautaro and Caupolicán, and contemporary martyrs such as Alex Lemun, killed in October 2002, are still alive in this poetry, and they are returning as nature. They are coming to life through nature. She says, Lemun, Lemun, your rebel blood waters with innocent sap the free paths of Wallmapu. Lemun, Lemun, you'll bloom in cinnamon trees and araucarias. Despite the continual attempts to erase and repress the traditional knowledge inherent in the Chilean national project and the transnational discourses about progress, through her poetry, Kvyeh creates a powerful tool to remember events from centuries ago and to empower her own epistemology, in which places preserve memory beyond the forgetfulness of its inhabitants, and in which time is radically different from Western understanding of past, present, and future. Indeed, this is not a fragmented time in which the past is gone and the future is uncertain. This is a rebel time that, despite the historical events, returns as waves and cycles. In her poem, Lemun is returning in the flowers and cones of the sacred trees of the Wallmapu. More than a poetic image, this is a certainty framed in a specific system of non-negotiable beliefs in which time is continuous and flows every day from the origin. Moreover, the poet is aware that the past is more than historiography, and despite our intent to bring it back or represent it with words, those events of the past still exist somewhere, somehow. Caupolicán resists with the Pewenche tree's strength. The water is definitely stronger than dams and chains. And the Bio River continues to bring news from the snow mountains as a faith keeper of the Mapuche memory. Challenging stereotypes of an essentialism, this poetry also explores territories, memories, and cultures beyond the Wallmapu. Her migrant poetry is a consequence of years in exile, also of a wide understanding of resistance, in which her literature embraces other nations' struggles. Furthermore, we could say that in Kvyeh's poetry, in contrast to the conceptual proposition by Gupta, Ferguson, and Hall, as explained earlier, cultural identity for Kvyeh is determined by her Mapuche understanding of space-time, no matter if the poet is in the Gulumapo, in Freiburg, Germany, or in Nicaragua. Some of the poems from Luna de Cenizas, Moon of Ashes, for example, were written in 2000 during a trip around Europe when the NATO was bombing the old Yugoslavia. She says, in 2000, when United States imperialism, in complicity with the European states, decided to support the war based on the big lie of saving the Albanians, I was traveling by train with my backpack full of poems, under a sky covered by airplanes carrying their message of death. And in the streets, there were the voices of protests of thousands of women and men against the war. People have to fight to their own liberation without the imperialist intervention. I accompanied them with a pencil and a paper, writing these thoughts, she said. From the great Walmapu to Kosovo, Kvyeh's words play with irony. In Delirio Verde, Green Delirium, she writes, the man in his delirium thought it was a tree. He dressed in green. His trunk is empty. His branches multiply green tickets. His head chewed bombs. After many years of migration, exiles, encounters, and exchange, there is an attitude that remains in her poetry, her responsibility toward nature, and her certainty to belong to a specific place. It is nature who activates the sense, words, revolutions, and what we have been calling places are approached in this poetry from a wider perspective, the body itself as a space, culture, and memory. Again, this is not a metaphor. It is a fact that the mother's body is the space, the territory. It is home for who is coming. Rivers, mountains, tides inhabit the body of the mother. The body itself is the universe, is a microcosm. Rape is an act of invasion of the territory. To be born is to empower the body to protect the mother. In the end, Kvyeh offers a revolutionary eroticism in her poetry. Beyond stereotypes about submissive indigenous women and essentialism, Kvyeh reveals a political alternative in the multiple possibilities of the woman's body. In Brotes de Luna Llena, Sprouts of Full Moon, there is a constant, what I will call handy pronoun, which may be filled by the reader. The pronoun he, him, you can be replaced with nouns such as freedom or revolution. The many phases of this poetry demonstrate how literature is not just an entertainment enterprise. For many contemporary native migrants, writers from the Americas, it is also a unique opportunity to spread the teachings of their elders and at the same time their own personal journeys. Thank you.